it's easy to feel like when you're doing that kind of work midlife, that like it's almost like a failure. Like you should have had it figured out coming out of college or something, but like you
Right.
couldn't have. You weren't the same person in college. Like it took all of that life to get you to this point where you could take an honest look at who you are and actually appreciate what you see.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Made to Matter. I am the founder and your host, Adam Landrum. Made to Matter is where we help men find their purpose, live their purpose, and have a more fulfilling second half. And I am excited to have Justin Almas with us today, who he's a special guest. Of course, all of our guests are special, but he's special in that he pretty much does the exact same thing that I do at Made to Matter. So you're getting sort of probably a peek behind the curtain. We're going to talk a little shop. We're going to, we're gonna tell all of our coaching secrets that we do and how we do our work. I'm half joking, but maybe not. And we'll jump in. So Justin, thank you for joining us today. And I'll just turn it over to you real quick, just to give us a quick background and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. It's a pleasure to be on with you, Adam. I appreciate it. Let's see, where do I start? I guess as it relates to career, I jumped into ministry right after college. I was an adventure camp director for a little while there and decided to kind of pivot from that into church ministry. And so then I was an executive pastor for a little over a decade. I was in the local church. And then a few years back, decided to make a pivot from that. And that was in my mid-30s. So I would say I was definitely on the front end of the second half of life window, the way that I understand it. Not that there's a specific age necessarily, but certainly hit me a little earlier than some, when I just started wrestling through deep questions around identity and purpose and belief. And, people are often surprised to hear that, seeing as I was a pastor.
Yeah.
Usually that's very fulfilling work. And it was in a lot of ways. And in a lot of ways, what I do now, until it isn't. In a lot of ways, what I do now is a continuation of kind of the best parts of that, at least for me, and the way that I see it and just the way I'm wired. And I love the coaching space, guiding. I do spiritual direction as well. It's just the sacred space when you can create room for someone's soul to feel safe enough to come out is what I love. And so any opportunity I have to do that is what I like. Is what I take, I guess.
All right. Very cool. Well, yeah. So let's talk about the age thing, because that comes up, and I'm sure you've heard it too from your side. Is like, well, is it at 40? Is it at 45? Like, what's the exact age? And I think in my experience, it's been the average. So I actually joke and say I had a quarter life crisis.
Yeah.
I've had midlife crisis too. So it's no stranger to me. But if you take the average age expectancy of 78, midlife is actually where's my math? Or 76. Midlife is at 38 years old. We like to push it a little further. Like some people like to push it to 50, and I'm like, well, maybe we'll live to 100. I don't know. But so it sounds like you were on track, maybe a little early in terms of the average.
Yeah, I either had my quarter life late or my midlife early, but
There you
either
go.
way, it felt like a crisis.
Yeah. What would you say prompted the dissonance, eventually?
Yeah, that is a loaded question. I love it though. When I reflect on that, I was actually reflecting on it a little bit this morning. For me, I grew up in the church, and I kind of been around the faith my entire life, to Christian school, Christian college, and it was just kind of like the air I breathed. Seminary, right, and then right into church ministry, or camp then church. So it was so much a part of my life. There was a lot of information I felt like I had acquired about God, but what I was really longing for was more experience. Inner experience, spiritual experience. As someone who kind of naturally moves through the world head first instead of heart first, my religion, or my faith, I guess, was largely conceptual.
Okay.
And I think when I was really honest and looked at my life honestly, there was a lack of transformation. There was a gap between how much I knew and how much I felt like I had changed or been transformed. And so I kind of decided that I am going to pursue experience of God at all costs.
Yeah.
And that led me to places I never expected, uh, namely outside of pastoral ministry and the church altogether, for the
Yeah.
most part. And so it was a pretty radical rewiring of my belief system, which inevitably led to a rewiring of my own sense of identity and purpose and meaning and how this all fits together. And I think it opened me up to mystery and curiosity and this wild adventure of the spiritual journey. And so I was just given a whole new framework and vocabulary for this human experience that we're living right now.
Yeah. Well, very cool. I can imagine there are many people, many listeners who were given a framework, either by their parents or by their, whatever culture they're in. I'm in the South. I know you know this, but everyone may not know. I'm in Greenville, South Carolina. So we're smack in the Bible Belt, and there's a strong framework. And I just keep hearing more and more men in particular saying, the framework I was given isn't necessarily the framework that's working for me. So
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
you unpack, did you find a new framework, and what does that look like? Or are you
Yeah.
still sort of like in process?
Definitely in process. I think what you just said really resonates. I think that was the language I used a lot of the time, whereas I felt like the life I had outgrown the life I was living. Like I was kind of living someone else's life. I had this role, I had this leadership, I had this influence, and it just wasn't me anymore. I didn't know what had happened exactly. As far as like a framework now, I think my assumptions have changed a lot. And my expectations for how much certainty is reasonable to have. So I like to say I have a lot more questions than I have answers, and I think that is part of the journey. I like to say I'm doing more unlearning than learning. I'm doing this spirituality of subtraction. I'm not sure who first said that, but that definitely rings true. And I think probably for a framework, I might have mentioned this to you last time we chatted, but Ken Wilber, he's an American philosopher, and he does a lot of work around human development, and he has a theory called integral theory, and I got really into those various theories of human development for a while. And they really helped kind of give a map in terms of where I was at and the different stages that I was moving through, stages of growth, development, maturity, and how some of this, I don't know if you, for me, it doesn't feel like a crisis of faith. It felt more like an evolution of faith, an
Okay.
expansion of faith, an opening, not a closing. And so it wasn't like doubt. It was more like, this just doesn't work anymore. This doesn't align with my experience. And I was learning to trust my experience because formerly I had been taught I couldn't trust it. And so all these things were coming together, but the framework of transcend and include that's something that Wilber talks about. And it's helped me not write off my story or my experience or past roles or even belief system, but try to integrate it into what's next or what's coming. And so so the idea is like I'm transcending it because I am growing beyond it, but I'm also including the best of it and acknowledging the roles that it has played in my story. And so for me, it's looking at the faith I inherited um, charitably and I think lovingly and being like, man, there were so many gifts there, so many
Yeah.
treasures there
Yeah.
that I want to give to my kids.
It's not like you're throwing that out with the
Right.
baby with the
And
bathwater, right?
exactly. That's the mistake I think I see a lot with in some folks that I work with at least. And so it's like, no, we can transcend it, but we can include the best of it and grow into something new. So
Yeah,
I
and
don't know
we
if
may
that's a
have talked
framework.
about the language of deconstructing your faith. Is that do you feel like that's a very similar vein in what you're doing, or?
I am very familiar with the term. I think at surface level, yes. Although there's a lot there's a lot, that's a pretty loaded term because like I said, it just feels so much more generative in my experience than destructive.
Yeah.
And so, but yes, if you look at it systematically, I systematically deconstructed my entire belief system and in process of reconstructing something new that is looking altogether different because the goal isn't necessarily to replace it, although there is obviously a certain degree of a system you need to be able to operate or function in the world. But I'm realizing it's a lot less than what I had before.
Yeah. Okay, cool. What and so I mean, I'm sure you got to a point where you're an executive pastor. I mean, and that's your career, and you probably thought you're going to be doing that for the rest of your life. So
Oh, yeah.
it was probably much a surprise to you as anyone else that you decided to go do something differently. What was
Mhm.
that like when you found yourself? I imagine it was some event or some culmination of stuff that you were sort of hit rock bottom, or there's a lot of discomfort and you're like, I have to pivot. And
Mhm.
how in the world am I going to keep making a living? Did you have that
Yes.
experience?
Absolutely. After it became clear that it was time for me to move on, I wanted to make sure, I left well, had all of the necessary conversations, had as much transparency around where I was at as I could. And, it was a pretty delicate situation because when you're a pastor, that's your community,
Yeah.
that's your family's community. So there's a lot of grieving after soon after I left. And it kind of felt like whiplash. I think going from like the grind and hustle of ministry and everyone kind of always needing something from you, and all of a sudden you wake up one day and it's like I don't have anything to respond to. Like no one really needs me. And so it was kind of unsettling at first. And
Yeah.
then I learned to really enjoy it.
You're like, this is
But
great. Nobody needs anything.
that's right. Yeah. But it was, I had to learn. I really did have to learn how to enjoy the sabbatical that I was on. So that was, about 9 months or so. And during the back end of that time, I really started to get serious about what I'm going to do next. And for a while, it was like, I have no idea what I want. I only know what I don't want. Is kind of how it felt. And so I think the more I was away from what my former role and career, the more it was kind of like things began to just settle, and I felt like I could start kind of putting myself out there again, and kind of initiating conversations with both past friends and new friends. And um, I started to warm up to the idea, I guess, of leaning into the skills and experience that I had in as a pastor. Because for a while I felt like I just want to do something totally different. I don't want to have like an influential role in major life decisions anymore.
Yeah.
So I just needed some space from all that. But the longer I was away from it, it was like, no, that's what I miss. It's part of who I am, as a guide, as a leader, as just someone who cares about soul work. It's like I need to find a new container for these gifts, and so that's how I found my way into the kind of coaching that I'm doing now, which is largely helping men through deep transitions, professional, personal, doesn't matter. It's like
Right.
those are for me, those are all soul level questions and transitions that we work with,
Yeah. The soul is, I imagine you're finding the soul is usually involved when you're in a deep transition, right?
whether you know it or not. It always
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Yeah. Whether you acknowledge it or not. Yeah. And then, and you're married, right? Okay. And what did your wife think about this time?
Yeah, that's a great question. Was not easy. I think we were definitely agreed and on the same page in terms of like my time as a pastor had come to an end. And I kind of joke with her. She had always said she didn't want to marry a pastor, and I kind of bait and switched her because that wasn't the original plan. Um, and so when I left, I was like, "You're welcome."
Yeah.
She was
See,
like,
you just had to wait a
"Cool. So
little bit.
now what are you gonna do?" Right? But I think she really did appreciate and enjoyed the space, kind of away from, honestly, just church for a while, and just some of the demands of on a pastor's wife and pastor's family. And there's some unique pressures there that I think she was relieved to have space from. I think it was more challenging the reasons around some of my, call it deconstruction, faith evolution, whatever term fits there. That wasn't necessarily happening together for us. It was happening in different ways for different reasons. So um, that's a long way of answering your question. That's how she felt about it.
Yeah. Okay. So how long has this been now? How long you been at
So
coaching?
I left that in 2022,
Okay.
and 2023 was my sabbatical. And then by the end of that, I was starting to do some coaching.
Okay. And so how has that gone? I mean, in terms of going from, really, well, I don't know if it was zero, but zero to 100. Like, how has that process been for you?
Ups and downs. I think, at the beginning, there's just so much energy around something new for me, and I love learning. So I love learning a new application of these skills and like the certifications and um, whenever you start something new, you kind of start with people closest to you in your network. And so that's what I started. And I found that everyone I was working with, um, I had some degree of connection to. And usually the reason we were working together is because they were going through a transition of some kind. And I loved it. It was great. It was mostly one to one. And so I got off to a quick start and was building a lot of confidence, getting a lot of reps, and what I started to realize by the end of 2024 is like, oh, the art of coaching is a different skill set than the business of coaching. And there's some other systems that need to be built here, and some other skills, honestly, that don't come quite as naturally to me. And
Yeah.
so in 2025, it was a little humbling to be like, okay, I need to take a learner's posture towards this, and I need to start building the foundation of this business if I want to create something that's really lasting and sustainable. So I think there's times where I feel like, man, I should be further ahead than I am right now. There's times where I'm like, why does this feel so hard? Right. And there's days where I'm like, maybe I need to look for that resume.
Yeah. Yeah.
Punching into a 9 to 5 doesn't sound half bad right now. Right. And there's trade-offs. There's just trade-offs for anything. I love the freedom that self-employment and working, for yourself and the creative liberty brings.
Yep.
But there's also just unique challenges. There's no one else, setting deadlines for you and making sure you're, doing what you need to do to move things forward every day. So that's kind of how the journey's been. I'm sure you can relate to that on some level.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think in the context for our audience too is we're not talking necessarily about coaching in general, but that self-employed, about the solopreneur.
Yeah.
And it is, so my experience, I owned an agency for 22 years, and I can tell you, uh, I wanted to quit about 30 times during those 22 years. And many, many times it was really close. Just pulling the plug and go and moving on. And I'm so glad I didn't, right? I'm glad that I persevered and had resilience, because it is a roller coaster. There's a great quote, I'll butcher it, but in Parenthood, the grandma says, you know, some people like to ride the merry-go-round. It just goes round and round and round. She said, but the roller coaster, it goes up and down and up and down. What a thrill. I want to ride the roller coaster. And that to me is just like the epitome of what it is to be an entrepreneur or solopreneur. It's thrilling, but it's scary, and it's normal, right? It's totally normal. I think we see all these people on LinkedIn or other place, even Inc. magazine or Fast Company or something. It's like $1 billion business in, like, 3 months, and like they had no. And it's just like, that's just not reality. Reality is it's hard work, but man, it is so rewarding, so rewarding.
Yeah. Agreed.
Um, and let's talk about the identity thing a little bit too, that we see in our clients. Because even as a pastor, I totally understand that that seems like that some people may think that's unique with a pastor, and it is somewhat. But I can also say that I experienced that from being a business owner to selling my business. And even then, I know people say, you aren't your business, and like, be careful, your identity will be wrapped around your business more than you think. Even knowing that, that transition was still hard, because it was the same thing. Employees weren't coming to me anymore. Clients weren't coming to me anymore. I wasn't needed, and I wasn't the man anymore. And looking around, going, wait a minute, what's going, what's going on? So what have you seen in these deep transitions of your clients that you know a how does the struggle present itself, and b, what do they do to get out of that decline,
Mhm.
if you will?
Yeah. I often see reinvention strategies, either before they come to coaching or during. And that's not altogether a bad thing. I think it's the ego trying to figure out like who am I now, and if I can like maybe change up my wardrobe or the music I listen. It's honestly it sounds kind of like teenage things sometimes,
Yeah.
but it's like it's real, right?
Or
It's
get a
like
sports car
get
or
a sports car is the classic one, right? But like strategies to just try something new and kind of experiment and see what feels right, right? What kind of feedback they get from other people. But inevitably they're short lived, right? And most people kind of figure that out pretty quickly. What I've found more effective is instead of reinvention, rediscovery, kind of discovering the self that was always there.
Mhm.
And the work that I do, there's a few different components to it. I do focus on some personality intelligence, and so obviously there's a lot of different assessments you can use to get some of the information, and it's all helpful. But really, it's about applying that information. And sometimes it's not always new information; it's stuff that you always knew, but you were too close to it
Yeah.
to really see it. And when you see yourself like in a report or get feedback from a partner that's like, oh yeah, you totally do that, or that's totally a strength, that's not a strength, it becomes real. And so I think when you start using some of, or I should say another a tool that I like to use is just a tool around core values, right? Helping identify like what are those, and not just kind of like first pass, but really sit with it for a while and distill, because it's like when you look at values on paper, they all look like they should be core values, but they're not, right? There's just a
Yeah.
few to you that are unique, and then how do we wrap that up into like a mission statement or a purpose statement, right? What are the activities that, given your unique wiring and core values, what are the activities that are containers for that in the world? And so some of that work I think helps unearth um, stuff that's always there, because then you can look at your narrative or your storyline and you can see points in your life growing up and in high school and college and things, awards you got or jobs you had in high school that like didn't seem significant, but it's all kind of part of the trail that is giving you clues to who you are and who you're becoming. And sometimes we lose sight of that, I think, as we go through our careers and raising families, and life kind of beats us down a little bit. And so
Yeah.
I found in my own journey, almost like recovering some of that essence that I was as a kid. The things that people used to say to my parents about me are still true. And they're finding new expressions now as I'm doing this coaching work.
Right. That's awesome. So so just to reflect back, what I heard you say is like you have seen with your clients, they try to reinvent, they try to make something new, and it sounds like the work you actually do, they find out that's not gonna last, and so you actually take them back to their foundation of like, hey, what are your values? What's the essence of who you are? Growing up or
Mm-hmm.
in your past, and then get into the mission and even to the purpose, right? So that
Right.
sounds like pretty heavy grounding.
It is.
Yeah, what happens when your clients, um, you know, I guess figure it out or define it and agree with it?
Well, I think for one, it can become a filter for decision making, because
Mhm.
you're more clearly able to identify like what are opportunities that align with my gifting and which ones have I been trying to make align, but they just clearly don't. Like when I look at the way that I'm wired, I look at my story, I look at my values, like this just doesn't fit, but I've been told that it should fit. And so they get permission, maybe is one way to think about it, a permission to discard the things that no longer serve them and lean into the things that do, and more honesty and objectivity around what those things are. And I think a lot of that does come with just age, maturity, and experience. I mean, that's part of growing in wisdom. So it's like it's easy to feel like when you're doing that kind of work midlife that like it's almost like a failure. Like you should have had it figured out coming out of college or something, but like you
Right.
couldn't have. You weren't the same person in college. Like it took all of that life to get you to this point where you could take an honest look at who you are and actually appreciate what you see.
Yeah.
And so that,
Well, and part of it is that in that first half, you're so busy with dealing with all the things, all the life coming at you. And I think, isn't it, part of it in midlife is like the stuff stops coming at you. You're like, "Wait a minute.
yeah,
Who who am I?" The
yeah,
kids leave, if you have kids, family, the kids leave, and, I mean, that's I think sums up sort of the midlife crisis is like, "Oh my gosh, all the meaning is now gone," and thought I thought the meaning was inside me, and it really wasn't. I was outsourcing it.
mm, yeah,
Yeah. So, So yeah, so how long have you seen it takes for someone to do that work?
I usually have a minimum of 3 months just to make sure that they give it the time it requires. Obviously, it's up to them to really do the work, but I think there can be some meaningful progress made in 3 months to feel like there's some clarity around that who am I question. And now, what to do with that might take another 3 months, but that kind of identity work or that work around answering that question, who am I? At least that's kind of the first component of the framework I like to move men through. 3 months isn't a reasonable amount of time, but it can certainly take much longer than that.
Yeah. And then so once they figure it out, and then what to do with it, how do you work with them in terms of figuring out what to do?
So I like to say we need know yourself, see yourself, lead yourself. That's kind of the 3-part framework that I move them through. And we've already covered know yourself. See yourself then is more around vision. Where am I now? Where do I want to go? And
Yeah.
so that's where I try to integrate some of the spiritual journey or those theories of human development I mentioned earlier, where it's like, okay, like I'm not an isolated this is not an isolated experience. There have been others that have moved through these stages of development before me. There's been lots of research done to kind of plot some of these movements and even give names to some of these stages. Here's kind of where I'm at, and this starts making a little bit more sense. And so we've got some points of reference now. And sometimes just having the awareness that that's a thing, and that all those stages you've been through are somewhat predictable, and here are all the stages in front of you, and it doesn't mean you got to get there tomorrow. It just means like here's what you might be able to expect, right? And so then we start creating some vision around where they want to go, and sometimes that can be related to like a new career, like what's going to be a good fit for your expression of gifts. Sometimes it can be relocating, and sometimes it's less about the exterior ornaments of their life and more about interior. Who do I want to be? Who am I becoming? Who do I envision myself as a father, husband, leader? And then the third piece of that, lead yourself, is all about execution, because all this awareness that we have is only half of the deal. We actually got to do the work, put it into practice. So then we look at systems, habits, rhythms, routines, not just personal, but also like with families. If they're leading a team, then with their teams, because it all fits together. And there has to be some testing and iterating, right? And so I think continually updating and revising these systems that are underneath our life and really shape who we're becoming is a huge piece.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so I mean, it sounds like it could be open ended if a client wanted it to be that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That
Yes, I've definitely done. I mean, I've tried different approaches to engagements. Selling packages one on one, but I definitely have found the retainer option where it's like, yeah, this is open ended because the work never stops. However, I will say, oftentimes clients eventually hit their saturation point of and might want to pivot their focus to something else, whether it's a different kind of coach or therapist, or feel like they're independent enough to kind of do it on their own for a while. So it can look different ways depending on what the actual objectives are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I like your three things. I have a three thing. I think it's similar. It's probably just different language, but
Yeah.
my mantra is every man needs to know his purpose, have a vision, and be on a mission. And again, it goes back to the adventure thing. It's like I think we were made for adventure. And again, in midlife, all of a sudden the adventure stop coming at you, and you have to create your own. So it's like the Which Way books we had growing up. I
Right.
had growing up.
Yeah.
So so yeah, I mean, and how much of it, of like what percentage of your clients is it career that they're struggling with, or that's part of the solution in terms of reorienting their career?
Always a piece of it because we
Yeah.
spend so much of our time at our jobs and they just shape so much of our sense of self. Um, so it's a common, I would say, invitation into the conversation, whether that is I need something completely new or I just need to figure out a new way of showing up here. I've seen both. I've also seen, kind of more relevant to our conversation, men who have had a very successful career and have kind of reached a point in their careers where they know how to play the game. Like they've achieved it, they've won it multiple times. They're kind of tired of rinse and repeat, just kind of making more money for other people, for themselves. And they're like, I want something with more substance and I want to turn my attention to legacy. So, how do I take all of these skills and this experience that I've gained throughout the course of my career and channel them into something that feels more meaningful? So, I would say career is almost always a piece of it.
Yeah.
In some way.
Yeah. And I love the word vocation, and the definition of vocation is basically, a job with a calling, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
always say, for many, it's something you can't not do.
Yeah.
It's just been, you've just been itching to do it, and you've been, whether it's too scared or you made too much money or you were just too busy. And oftentimes in the second half, it presents the opportunity. You can go do your vocation. You can go do that very thing you always wanted to do.
Yeah.
Um, and I love seeing men do that and go after it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, what's for you? Who do you think is an ideal person that you think you could help the most?
I usually say mid-career men. I've worked with women as well, but I've just found that men are underserved in the coaching market as a whole and are less likely to reach out for help. And I just have found that I just really enjoy doing men's work, even
Mhm.
throughout like pastoral ministry. And so mid-career men, and usually that are moving through some kind of a transition, and doesn't need to be a crisis, but men or just anyone in transition is often just more receptive to what life is inviting them into. And there's already a felt need that, like, okay, what got me here isn't going to get me there.
Yeah.
And that transition can be personal, it can be professional. I think it's always spiritual in nature. And so that's where I try to take a really integrated approach, because we can't just talk about your professional life with also talking about your personal life, because who you are informs how you lead and show up at work more than anything else. Right. And so
Totally. Yeah.
we get to that level pretty quickly. And that's where kind of that, I think, pastoral experience comes in, because you're used to kind of dealing with kind of the rawness of this human condition, on a pretty regular basis.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you mentioned that, to the individual in the moment, they think that this is really unique. And this is, I'm sorry, you saw this from a pastoral standpoint. Like everyone thinks their situation is unique. And you're
Yeah.
like, no, I've actually seen this about 100 times.
Yeah, totally.
But one thing I would like our audience to know is like, you might be in a situation in transition where it feels heavy, and it
Hmm.
might feel insurmountable. It might be unique and feel unique to you. But like, I think what we would say, what Justin and I've been talking about is, no, it's actually quite normal. Like it's for many men, this is the course that we go on. And there
Hmm.
is we call it, from a spiritual standpoint, we call it a crisis of belief, right? Or a midlife crisis or something, where we're like, this just isn't lining up with my, you said, your framework anymore. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, a lot of people go and do foolish things thinking that that's gonna free something up. And
Hmm.
and there could be consequences to that,
Yeah.
versus taking a systematic approach of going, something's off, something needs to change. I don't know what it is. I need to go get help. And I'd say that's exactly what Justin and I do, and have the frameworks and the tools to help you, when you're stuck in those situations. So, and for
Yeah.
reference, you're in Colorado, right?
That's right. Yep. Just west of Denver, out in a town called Golden. So just right before you head up I-70 to go skiing, you'll pass my neighborhood.
And Coors Brewery too.
I in
Um,
Coors. Yeah. Right by
yeah.
Coors.
And yeah, and so and like I said, I'm in South Carolina. Of course, each of us work with people around the country, maybe even around the world. I don't think I have international clients yet, but it's gonna, certainly, it's just right around the corner. um but Justin, where can people find you?
LinkedIn, pretty active there. FG.coach is my website. But LinkedIn's probably the best place.
All right, fg.coach, and Justin Almas, Almas.
Yep.
on LinkedIn. All right. So for a man right now, my last question, I think, for a man right now struggling, career maybe might be a big part of what he's struggling with. What advice, what hope do you have to give him?
You're not alone. We are many. There's, yeah, it's probably not talked about enough, but it's part of this evolution of who you're becoming. This, uh, I think, progression towards maturity, and I think there's resources out there to provide points of reference, to provide a map for that journey. But sometimes just knowing it's a journey, and you're right where you're supposed to be, and others have come before you, and others will come after you, and um, I think that was helpful to me to know. And I wasn't failing. I wasn't the exception. I wasn't defective.
Yeah.
This is part of the process and part of, I think, living well and growing up.
Yeah. Well said. And don't be afraid to go get help. Ask for
That's right.
help.
That's right.
Um,
Yep.
that's part of the deal too. So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, Justin, thank you so much for joining me. Love the conversation today. And again, you can find Justin on LinkedIn, and you can find Made to Matter and Adam Landrum on LinkedIn as well. So thank you all. Until next time, we'll see you then.